Today we uncover the shocking truth about UK summer drinks and frozen treats. Has anyone started to notice that the ice cream that's being sold doesn't actually cool you down anymore like it used to? Sure, it's cool to the touch and tastes cold in the moment, but 30 seconds later, you're just as hot, if not hotter, than before you had it. Look at the ingredients list on most mainstream tubs and sticks, and you'll find a small forest of stabilizers, emulsifiers, and gums, keeping the texture smooth after months sitting in a warehouse freezer, alongside sugar and saturated fat levels that would raise eyebrows if they turned up in a savoury ready meal instead. It's expensive, it's heavily processed. A single small tub from a self-serve frozen yogurt counter, weighed out and charged by the gram, can easily run past £5 or £6 once the toppings go on. And a multi-pack of branded ice cream sticks from the freezer aisle now regularly costs more than a proper meal. And for that money, what are you actually getting? That's not just an opinion, it comes down to basic physiology. And digesting all these modern ingredients produces its own small amount of internal heat, working quietly against the very cooling sensation you just paid £5 for. A drink that's genuinely high in water content, or one carrying a little natural salt the way your own sweat does, gives your body the raw materials to cool itself properly, rather than a fleeting cold sensation in your mouth followed by a crash 20 minutes later. None of this means dessert is banned. It simply means that when the temperature climbs, reaching for the same cones out of habit is not actually the smart move it feels like at the time. There's a drink sitting in the world food aisle of your local supermarket right now, costing less than £1, that most of Britain has walked straight past for years. There's a trick with a bag of frozen grapes that makes your fizzy water taste like something out of a cocktail bar, and almost nobody in this country has ever been told about it. And there's a savoury drink your grandparents used to reach for on a hot day that has all but vanished from modern shopping lists. So we've gone through the supermarket shelves, the world food aisles, and the kitchen cupboards of Britain, and we're counting down the 30 best drinks and frozen treats this country has forgotten about. The ones that are cheaper, considerably more natural, and actually work with your body's cooling system instead of against it. But before we get into any of that, I need to ask you something, and I mean this properly. If you've ever felt ripped off standing in a freezer aisle wondering how a tub of frozen yogurt costs more than your lunch, or if you've ever wished someone would just tell it to you straight, what's worth your money and what's not, then hit that hype button right now. Every single time this channel grows, it makes it that much harder for these companies to quietly charge you more for less and hope nobody notices. You clicking that button is a small thing on your end, but it adds up into something that genuinely pushes back. It tells these corporations that people are paying attention, that we aren't just going to accept whatever gets put on the shelf at whatever price they decide, and that shoppers like you're demanding better standards and honest pricing instead of clever packaging doing the talking for them. So hype the video, and while you're at it, drop a comment, because I genuinely want to know what you think, which of these drinks you're going to try, and which ones you think we've got wrong. And if you aren't subscribed yet, do that too, because there's a lot more of this coming and I would rather you didn't miss it. And let's get into it. Number 30. Frozen berry soft serve. Raspberries, strawberries. Or a mixed supermarket bag, blitzed frozen with a splash of yogurt, milk or coconut water, create a thick, soft serve style texture that tricks your brain into thinking it's eating dessert, without anywhere near the fat and sugar load your body then has to work through to digest. A £2 bag of frozen berries from Asda, Lidl, or any other supermarket goes a long way here, considerably further than a £5 tub of dairy ice cream, and it gives you the antioxidants of whole fruit rather than the sugar, cream, and stabilizers of a traditional tub. A high-powered blender gives the smoothest result, but even a basic one will get you there with a little patience and a few short pulses rather than one long blitz. Number 29. Salted yogurt drink, also known as ayran in Turkey or chaz in India. Whisked plain yogurt, very cold water, and a small pinch of salt, sometimes with mint or roasted cumin stirred through. It sounds completely wrong to British ears, savoury and salty rather than sweet. But the combination is genuinely refreshing, and there's a reason for that beyond taste. The small amount of salt replaces some of what your body loses through sweat, giving it something to work with rather than just diluting it with plain water. Supermarkets and world food shops sell bottled versions for around £1, and the homemade version costs next to nothing, just a spoonful of yogurt whisked with cold water until it turns light and frothy. Number 28. Rose milk. Cold milk with rose syrup poured through it and a handful of ice. On its own, it can tip into being extremely sweet, so the better version uses a lighter hand with the syrup and lets the milk do most of the work. If you want to go one step further, soaked basil seeds sold as sabja in world food shops add a strange gelatinous texture that people either love or find deeply unsettling, somewhere between a chia seed and a tiny bubble. And it's worth trying just to see which camp you fall into. The pale pink colour alone makes this one worth putting in front of the camera. Number 27. Homemade dandelion and burdock. A distinctly British soft drink, herbal and slightly bitter, that used to sit on cafe counters up and down the country, and has now been pushed almost entirely out of the mainstream by the same handful of branded fizzy drinks. A simple version can be made by steeping dandelion root and burdock root, both sold dried in health food shops, in hot water, sweetening lightly, then chilling and topping up with sparkling water. It tastes like nothing else on supermarket shelves today, and it's a proper piece of British drink history that most under 50s will never have tasted. Closer in spirit to a herbal cousin of root beer than to anything currently sold as a soft drink in this country. Number 26. Indian gooseberry cordial, sold in the UK under names like Nelly Crush, made from a fruit also known as amla. Fresh amla is one of the most vitamin C-dense fruits that exists, with some nutrition sources putting it at around 20 times the vitamin C of an orange gram for gram, diluted into a cordial and sweetened for bottling. This won't carry quite that concentration, so we aren't going to tell you a glass of it works the same as a plate of the raw fruit, but it remains a sharp, tangy, genuinely different alternative to ordinary squash. Mixed with cold water or soda and a good handful of ice, it tastes like nothing else in your cupboard, and a single small bottle from a world food shop, sold for roughly cordial prices, will last through several jugs of it, the vivid green colour alone making it worth a place on the table. Number 25. Watermelon and cucumber slush. Watermelon chunks frozen overnight, blitzed with lime juice and a small amount of cucumber. Both ingredients are well over 90% water, which matters more than it sounds. Because topping up your body's water levels is exactly what keeps sweat production working properly on a hot afternoon, rather than the fleeting chill of something merely cold on your tongue. It also happens to be about as photogenic as a drink gets, pale pink, icy and dripping with condensation the moment it leaves the blender. And it costs a fraction of a shop-bought smoothie made from the same basic ingredients with a brand name and a Q attached to it. Number 24. Cold tomato juice. A dash of lemon, a crack of black pepper, and a few drops of Worcestershire sauce. This was a genuinely popular hot weather drink for older generations in Britain, and it has almost entirely disappeared from modern habits, pushed out by sweeter, more heavily marketed options. It's savoury, sharp, and will absolutely divide opinion in your comments section, which is exactly what a good entry on this list should do. So serve it in a proper glass with ice, rather than straight from the tin if you want it to feel like a treat rather than a chore. And a stick of celery on the side does no harm either. Number 23. Frozen banana milkshake. Overripe bananas that would otherwise be thrown in the bin, the blackened ones sitting forgotten in your fruit bowl, blended frozen with cold milk and nothing else. The texture comes out thick and genuinely creamy without a scoop of ice cream anywhere near it, and it turns food waste into a proper treat, one that costs you nothing extra since the bananas were heading for the bin regardless. And it takes under a minute in a blender from start to finish. Number 22. Coffee ice cubes. Freeze leftover coffee from your morning pot into an ice tray, then pour cold milk over the frozen cubes later in the day. It solves the watery, sad iced coffee that results from ordinary ice cubes melting straight into your drink. It costs nothing beyond coffee you already own, and it looks considerably more impressive on camera than it has any right to. Especially poured slowly over the cubes in a clear glass, so you can watch the colours mix, and it means the last cup from the pot never has to go to waste. Number 21. Elderflower Cordial Spritz. Elderflower cordial topped up with cold sparkling water and a handful of ice. It uses an ingredient that's thoroughly, quintessentially British, growing wild in hedgerows across the country every early summer, and yet has quietly fallen out of everyday use in favour of more heavily marketed, more heavily sugared soft drinks, despite costing very little and needing nothing more than a bottle bought once at the start of summer. Number 20. Homemade lemon barley water. Squash made properly strong with fresh lemon juice, a few mint leaves, and a heavier hand with the ice than you would normally use. It tends to outperform anything from a bottle and costs a fraction of the elaborate iced drinks currently doing the rounds online. It's unglamorous, it's old-fashioned, and that's precisely the point of including it. A drink your grandmother would recognize instantly served back to her with a bit more care taken over it, and one that costs so little to make that a whole jug barely dents the shopping bill. Number 19. DIY Fruit Squash Lollies. Ordinary squash made slightly stronger than you normally would mix it, poured into cheap plastic molds and frozen overnight, dropping in sliced grapes, a few berries. Or even a swirl of yogurt before freezing gives you something considerably cheaper than shop-bought ice lollies, at a fraction of the cost per portion, which matters a great deal to anyone making these for grandchildren on a tighter budget. And the molds themselves get reused summer after summer, so the only ongoing cost is the squash itself. Number 18. Homemade ginger cordial. Fresh ginger, sugar, and water simmered together for around 20 minutes, then strained and topped up with sparkling water and ice. It gives you a proper ginger beer-style drink, without the enormous sugar content some branded ginger beers carry, and it keeps in the fridge for well over a week. So one batch covers you for most of a heatwave without any repeat effort. Adjust how much ginger goes into the pan, depending on whether you want a gentle warmth in the background or something that properly bites on the way down, and a splash of lemon juice at the end sharpens the whole thing up nicely. Number 17. Frozen grapes. Freeze a bag of seedless grapes overnight, then drop a handful into sparkling water instead of ordinary ice cubes. As they slowly thaw, they flavour the water rather than watering it down the way ordinary ice does, and children in particular tend to love them as a snack in their own right, straight from the freezer. Cold enough to make your teeth ache in the best possible way, and cheap enough that nobody minds if the whole bag disappears in one sitting. Number 16. Iced coffee lollies. Leftover coffee sweetened lightly and frozen in ice lolly molds with a splash of milk stirred through before it sets. It uses up coffee that would otherwise go cold and get poured away, and gives you a proper grown-up ice lolly rather than another shop-bought one loaded with syrup and stabilizers, closer to a frozen version of the flat white you had that morning than anything sold in a supermarket freezer aisle, and it turns what would have been a wasted half a cup into something worth looking forward to later in the day. Number 15. Iced blackcurrant cordial slush. Diluted blackcurrant cordial frozen in ice cube trays overnight, then blitzed with a splash more cordial, it brings back a genuinely nostalgic British flavour in a form that feels new again, and costs pennies per glass, compared with almost anything from a shop freezer, the sort of drink that will have older viewers instantly transported back to their own childhood. Standing in a school hall or a village fete with a paper cup in hand. Number 14. Frozen mint and lime granita. Sweetened lime juice and water poured into a shallow dish, frozen, then scraped with a fork every half hour until it turns into loose icy crystals. It's one of the oldest cooling tricks around, needing no equipment beyond a freezer and a fork, yet it has almost entirely disappeared from home kitchens in favour of shop-bought alternatives that do essentially the same job for considerably more money, wrapped in a branded tub instead of a shallow dish you already own. Number 13. Homemade fizzy orange. Fresh or shop-bought orange juice topped up with cold sparkling water, it gives you a grown-up alternative to branded fizzy orange drinks for a fraction of the price, and lets you control exactly how much sugar goes in, which is usually considerably less than a bottled version delivers by default, since most of the sweetness here is coming from the juice itself rather than anything added on top. And a slice of orange floated on top makes it look like considerably more effort went in than actually did. Number 12. Frozen yogurt bark. Plain or Greek yogurt spread thinly across a lined tray, scattered with whatever berries you've to hand, then frozen solid overnight and snapped into shards. It gives you a lower sugar alternative to shop-bought ice lollies, and the visual of it shattering into pieces makes for a genuinely satisfying bit of telly in its own right. Closer to a dessert bark you would find in an artisan chocolate shop than anything from a supermarket freezer, and a drizzle of honey before freezing dresses it up further without adding very much sugar at all. Number 11. Iced hibiscus tea, also known as carcade in world food shops. Brewed strong and chilled with a touch of sugar and a slice of lime, it gives you a deep red tart drink that looks genuinely dramatic on camera and costs very little to make from a bag of dried hibiscus flowers bought once and used for weeks. It's popular across the Middle East and parts of Africa for exactly this reason: cheap, easy to brew in bulk, and properly refreshing in serious heat, and it holds its colour and flavour just as well cold as it does served hot in winter. Number 10. Pineapple and ginger crush. Frozen pineapple chunks blitzed with cold water and a small amount of fresh ginger. It gives you something sharper and more interesting than yet another strawberry smoothie. And the bright yellow colour holds up beautifully on camera under almost any lighting, with the ginger adding a warmth in the background that stops the whole thing tasting one note. And tinned pineapple works nearly as well as fresh once it has spent a night in the freezer. Number 9. Mango sorbet blend. Frozen mango chunks blitzed with a squeeze of lime and a splash of water. It needs no ice cream maker whatsoever. Just a decent blender and a freezer you already own. And gives you something close to a proper sorbet for a fraction of what one would cost from an ice cream van on a hot day, with tinned mango pulp working nearly as well when fresh or frozen mango isn't available, and a pinch of chili flakes on top for anyone who wants to turn it into something a little more grown up. Number 8. Cucumber, mint and lime water. The trick most people miss is lightly crushing the cucumber and mint before adding them to the jug, rather than simply dropping slices in whole, which actually releases the flavour rather than leaving you with plain water and a few floating garnishes for decoration. Left in the fridge for a couple of hours and topped up with sparkling water just before serving makes a genuine, noticeable difference, turning a jug that usually tastes of nothing much into something you would actually choose to drink, rather than something you only offer to guests because it looks nice on the table. Number 7. Blended mango yogurt drink, better known as mango lassi. Blended yogurt, ripe mango and a touch of sugar. Making it at home with tinned mango pulp, widely available and inexpensive in most supermarkets and world food shops, works out considerably cheaper than a takeaway portion and gives you a thick, genuinely filling drink rather than an ordinary fruit juice that leaves you thirsty again within the hour. A handful of ice blitzed straight into the blender turns it into something closer to a milkshake, and it holds up well enough in the fridge that you can make a jug at once, rather than one glass at a time. Ready to pour whenever the next person walks into the kitchen complaining about the heat. Number 6. Fermented milk drink, also known as kefir. Related to yogurt, but thinner and considerably tangier, chilled and drunk on its own or blended with frozen fruit to soften the sourness. It sits in the same probiotic territory as iron, but with its own distinct sharpness, and supermarkets increasingly stock own-brand versions at a genuinely reasonable price. If the plain version is too sharp for your taste, a spoonful of honey or a handful of frozen berries blended through smooths it out considerably without losing what makes it interesting in the first place, and it's worth starting with a small bottle before committing to a bigger one. Number 5. Cold brew tea. Proper tea, brewed and chilled in your own fridge overnight, not bottled iced tea from the supermarket shelf. Earl Grey with a slice of lemon peppermint tea on its own, or a fruit tea with a handful of frozen berries dropped in, all work and all cost a matter of pence per glass, compared with a bottled equivalent. Bottled iced teas can carry considerably more sugar than shoppers expect, closer to a can of cola than to an actual cup of tea. So reading the label before assuming iced tea is automatically the healthier option is well worth the 30 seconds it takes, and brewing your own overnight means it's simply sitting there ready by the time you wake up. No queuing at a coffee shop counter required, and no syrup pump anywhere near it. Number 4. Cumin and lime water, also known as haljeera. Traditionally drunk before meals in hot Indian summers, just roasted cumin, lime juice, a pinch of black salt and cold water. It tastes savoury, sharp, and completely unlike anything currently sitting in a British cupboard, and it costs almost nothing to put together from spices most households already own. Toast the cumin seeds in a dry pan for a minute before grinding them, and the whole drink takes on a much deeper flavour than simply using ground cumin straight from the jar. It's one of the oldest tricks in Indian cooking for surviving proper heat, drunk in small glasses before a meal rather than gulped down in one go. And there's something genuinely sensible about a drink designed to wake up your appetite rather than kill it stone dead in the middle of a heatwave, the way an ice-cold fizzy drink so often does. Number 3. Raw mango drink, also known as aam panna. Made by boiling green mangoes with cumin and a touch of sugar until they soften and can be mashed into a pulp, then diluted with cold water and a pinch of salt. It takes longer than almost everything else on this list, more of a weekend project than a 2-minute fix, simmering the mangoes for a good 20 minutes before you can even get to the mashing. But the result is something genuinely unusual. Sour, sweet, and savoury all at once in a way nothing in a British cupboard comes close to. It introduces you to a whole category of Indian summer drinks, alongside sattu drinks made from roasted gram flour, that almost nobody outside South Asian households in Britain has ever had the chance to taste, and unlike most things on this list, a batch keeps in the fridge for several days, so the effort of making it only has to happen once a week. Number 2. Layered rose and vermicelli drink, also known as faluda. Built from rose syrup, milk, vermicelli noodles, and either basil seeds or a scoop of kulfi if you want to push the treat side further. It looks extraordinary served in a tall glass, layered rather than stirred, so you can see every ingredient sitting in its own band before you mix it together with a long spoon pink syrup at the bottom, pale noodles through the middle, and a scoop of something cold and creamy on top. It takes a little more assembly than anything else in this video, closer to building a dessert than pouring a drink, with each layer needing a moment to settle before the next one goes in. But it's exactly the sort of thing that would stop anyone scrolling past it on a thumbnail, and it works just as well served as a proper end-of-meal treat as it does as an afternoon cooler. The kind of drink that turns an ordinary Tuesday into something that feels a bit more like an occasion. Number 1. Coconut and kokum drink, also known as sol kaddi. A pale pink drink popular along India's western coast, made from coconut milk and the sour dried rind of the kokum fruit, tangy, faintly spiced, and served ice-cold as a palate cleanser in hot weather. Kokum is harder to find outside specialist world food shops than anything else on this list, so this one genuinely sits at the edge of what most of Britain would ever stumble across on its own, which is exactly why it earns the top spot. If you do track it down, it keeps well in the fridge for several days once made, and traditionally it's served alongside rice rather than drunk entirely on its own, though there's nothing stopping you treating it as a proper drink in its own right on a hot afternoon. It rounds off this list with the single most obscure, most far-flung discovery of the lot, proof that there's still plenty out there that Britain has never even had the chance to forget, because most of us never knew it existed in the first place. And that's the full 30. Britain has spent years defaulting to the same handful of summer treats, fizzy pop, bottled iced coffee, and an ever-growing tub of processed ice cream, while genuinely refreshing, genuinely cheap, and genuinely more natural alternatives have been sitting quietly in supermarket aisles, world food shops, and kitchen cupboards the entire time, actually working with your body's cooling system rather than just distracting your tongue for 30 seconds. None of it needs a special trip, a specialist shop, or a £300 machine, just a freezer, a blender, and a slightly more open mind about what a cold drink or a cold treat is allowed to look like. From the humble frozen grape sitting in a glass of sparkling water, right through to a kokum drink most of the country has never even heard of. The common thread running through every single one of these 30 is that somebody, somewhere, worked out decades or even centuries ago exactly how to survive real heat properly without a branded gadget or a £5 tub anywhere in sight. And it has taken this long for any of it to make its way back into a British kitchen in the middle of summer. Have a go at one this week. Try the Aran if you're feeling brave, or the frozen berry soft serve if you aren't quite ready for that, and see which one earns a permanent place in your fridge. If this video helped you find something worth trying this summer, hit that hype button. It genuinely makes a difference to this channel and to holding these companies to account for what they charge you and what they put in it. Leave a comment telling me which food or product we should cover next, because I read every single one and a good few of our videos started life exactly that way. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and protect your plate.